Welcome to the DevReady podcast. Joining me today on the DevReady podcast, I have Gareth Ryden. Thanks for joining me, Gareth.
Thanks, Anthony. Well, thanks for having me on. Great to meet you.
You too. I'm sure this will be a great conversation. So we're talking a little bit about AI, but before we jump into sort of the AI and the generative LLMs, I'll let you do a quick, brief introduction of yourself and some background just to give the audience a little bit of knowledge about yourself.
Great. Thanks, Anthony. So a bit about me. I'm a service designer. Love making things for people. Co-founded Friyay. Next week is our 1-year anniversary, which myself and two other co-founders are very excited about. And we specialize in helping small businesses implement AI solutions in their businesses. Predominantly, and I think you'd resonate, is to help them liberate their time and bring joy back to work.
Yep, and that's a good goal to have, to try and actually make people enjoy what they're doing rather than just treating it as a job where it's, all right, I just have to do this repetitive thing again and again.
Yes, 100%.
Yep.
100%. And it's almost a bit weird, like joy at work. People are like, is that possible? I'm like, yeah.
If you enjoy the area you're in or the type of role you're doing and you have passion behind it, then that definitely comes through. And I think, yeah, you would have that. I have that as well. Mm-hmm. What led you up to creating Friyay?
Great question. I think, well, there's a couple of things. Is that sort of February, March 2023. Gosh, it seems like that's such a long time ago, but it's not really that long ago.
No.
Myself and my two other co-founders, we're working in an organization called Stone and Chalk. Mm-hmm. And that's, if you're familiar, your viewers are familiar with the innovation ecosystem, predominantly helping with space for startups and scale-ups. But we were in their sort of advisory arm. So we're helping governments, large corporates work more like startups or be ready to integrate startups. And because we were in that space, we were naturally getting asked about generative AI, starting to really dive into it to try and understand it. And then the three of us, we saw the opportunity and effectively went all in. So we saw by how it was helping us liberate our time, bring a bit of joy back to work. And we really believe this is really that next wave of revolution for businesses and opportunities. So what led us to do it is we just thought we have to get into this full time. So the best way is to, as they say, put your money where your mouth is, or our various partners, our wives and husbands at home said, well, put our family money where our mouth is and put our mortgages on the line. And we went full time August. And then the other big driver for us is that we see this as there's a disproportionate opportunity for AI in small and medium businesses, and we saw a bit of a gap there, and it just meant that the best way we can start helping more people was to dedicate ourselves full time to it.
Yeah, and then so in that short period of advising and assisting on, all right, this is what startups are doing, this is how you can sort of change the way you're operating or being able to probably pivot quicker and having a bit more of that agile mindset is what I'm assuming you're probably getting across the line to these larger corporates who have these ingrained structures that are difficult to move from. How much of a shock was what generative AI could do at that point to them?
That's such a good question. It's when you're having conversations with them, few individuals get it and they saw the possibility. And this is kind of why we try not to work with larger corporates, because you get one or two people that are just, this is amazing, this can transform how we work, blows their mind. But then they went back into the machine and they start having conversations with their CIO, CTO, and it's a lukewarm response. And we may give some ChatGPT licenses out, but we're special and our business is so unique and we have to go through a 6-month business case, project management sign-off, project office. And there are some larger organizations, I'm sure, that get it, but to the point where they could really understand how it could change their whole sort of operating structure and this is in our experience, so I'm sure other people may have had different experiences, but in our experiences with talking to some of those larger businesses, you had one or two people that got it, but then it just got squashed in the machine and watered down, and they weren't able to either act or really drive that opportunity home. So for those larger businesses, bit of a mixed bag. But then when we started having conversations with small and medium businesses, and you get to speak to the owner, the people who run the business, they could really grasp the possibility, but also could act. They didn't have to do these big business cases. They weren't thinking of it like a big technology transformation. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to do a Salesforce implementation and it's going to be 18 months and tens of millions of dollars. They were much more of, how do I make my 5-person team work like a 30-person team, and how can I get that happening in the next couple of weeks? And they were starting to speak our language.
Yeah, the smaller people can pivot faster. I think we've seen a very similar thing in trying to discuss AI and deliver solutions that include that. The corporates, again, lots of red tape, takes forever to get anywhere. And I probably believe what happens is you do get a lot of efficiencies, and there probably in certain organizations, there's a lot of people that are getting by not doing everything they need to be doing, or it looks like they're putting a facade of, right, I'm working 100% of the time and I'm doing this, or everything's delegated. So that will bring that to light a lot faster too. So there's a lot of like self-protection there, and that's why things take so long.
Yeah.
Which is disappointing to see, especially at that larger level where everyone should be there on the same mission, driving forward towards the same goal, like you have with those smaller 5-person teams.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's such a great example. And it's kind of like the organization fat that gets built up over time, that there was no intention to do it. And in our experience, what you see is that's where lots of the resistance comes. Because, this might uncover a bit of the feet up on the desk and I'm doing stuff to be perceived to be busy. I'm in meetings back to back. I'm so busy. I can't stand that term. And each of Charmaine and Ben, my co-founders, we all constantly challenge that. Oh, we're really busy. Like, are we? Like, what does that term actually mean?
Yeah. And busy is normal. You're meant to be busy. You're not meant to have free time if you're working, ideally.
Yeah, totally agree.
So in those discussions that you had with Stone and Chalk, and probably the discussions you had over the past year, I'm assuming the smaller businesses are probably looking at more operational efficiencies and what tools can they leverage to do 2, 3, 4, 5x the amount of work with the same amount of team?
They do start there, but what we challenge them on is, we talk about this concept of skeuomorphism at Friyay. Have you come across that?
Yeah, I remember that term from the iPhone and Steve Jobs trying to make his apps look like a real world. So the leather off his private jet was the leather used inside the notebook app.
Yep, exactly. So we are 100% seeing a whole lot of skeuomorphic applications or skeuomorphic thinking around generative AI tools. So the example we use, and that Steve Jobs one is fantastic as well, we talk about when radio first came out, is the way it was used is you had people sitting in front of a microphone reading the newspaper. So new technology, applying an old way of working to a new technology, but only after that technology was around for a while did they start to say, I could go out in the world, take my microphone and interview someone, and my viewers, my listeners could hear that person talk. So we're seeing the same application. And I think you described that really well, is small businesses saying, how do I operate more efficiently? How might I do these things better? 5x my capacity. So what we're pushing them to think is, if you think in a non-skeuomorphic way, how could you generate a whole new business and revenue line through the advent of the augmentation of your business with generative AI? And when they start thinking that way, you get amazing ideas coming from them. And that's very much how we set ourselves up, is that we're not doubling down on one product or one solution. We're making that choice because we're trying to de-risk our future business, because we've seen that a new iteration of ChatGPT comes out and a whole swathe of startups that have doubled down on one product solution are obsolete overnight. Whereas we fundamentally believe is, if you help people think through a generative lens, they will come up with amazing ideas, and we help them bring those ideas to life. So a great example of that is, you've made a really great point, is we were chatting with this I would call it a technology business, but they effectively supply fantastic video conferencing solutions to large corporates. So you walk into one of those meeting rooms at a big corporate, you want to do a Teams meeting, all the tech is there. And they were saying, well, how might we use generative AI to deliver our solutions faster, better, cheaper, more efficiently? And as we were speaking with them and helping them think in a more generative sense, is they actually came up with an idea for a fundamentally new offering. And what that offering was, what they realized was they supplied all the tech, and when their customers when their customers would walk into a meeting room, we all know, oh, the tech isn't working. My screen's black. What do I do? I've got all these extensive people waiting to dial into a meeting and the time's ticking over. So pick up the phone, call tech support. Usually it's an offshore center because large corporates have offshored that. This offshore center is not connected, not understanding that they would raise a ticket, then it would go full circle back to our client. So we said to them, well, how might we reimagine that? So they came up with an idea of an AI augmented technical concierge. So they now provide that to their clients.
Okay.
So their clients don't have to pick up the phone. They go into a meeting room and they talk to the assistant we've trained. My screen's not turning on. And straight away, that assistant is helping them troubleshoot, get them up to their meeting. So for our client, whole new business line, whole new revenue stream for them that wasn't there before. So that's the kind of opportunity. And even that is a pretty simplistic opportunity. And we've barely scratched the surface of what these tools can do. And the way we think about it is that if you look at where we are right now, we've got access to infinite expertise. So it's not actually the answers that are the value, it's the questions you ask. So the only thing that holds us back from the possibilities of what we might do is the questions we ask of these tools, how we might think about where we might take our business. And then you harness the generative capabilities of these large language models.
So that infinite expertise is probably a crucial point in thinking about how to use the generative AI. You have the expertise at the organization. There's the domain knowledge. It's not use just ChatGPT as the umbrella term because that's probably the one that everyone's most famous with. It's not using ChatGPT as the be all and end all to your problems. It doesn't do what you want it to do. My best way of explaining it is it's glorified autocomplete.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's just going to tell you the words it thinks you want to hear. So it's not an expert, like you mentioned. You're the expert. It's what questions you ask. And that's where everyone's gone into what they're calling the prompt engineering now, which is how do I ask the right questions, or what's the one killer prompt that's going to solve everything? But you have to work with it or treat it. The way I see it is you treat it as an assistant. Mm-hmm. You can't tell your assistant go and do X without any detail because you're not going to get the results you want. And it's the same thing with those tools.
Yeah, that's a great example. We use the same with, we think about, you've got to imagine you've got this amazing graduate or intern that's just joined your team. And this is for those businesses out there, is that if you think, well, how do I say I've got this person sitting next to me and they're a human? You made such a great point. You wouldn't just say, go and do it. Say they've just started your business. You wouldn't say, oh, go and create my 5-year strategy. And that person would say, okay, well, what's the context? What's the goal of the business? What's the output? Like, do you want it in PowerPoint? Do you want it in Word? How long do you want it? What should the strategy cover? What are the constraints? You would normally sit down with a human and give them those in more detailed instructions. So thinking that way with any sort of AI model can change how the outputs are, and even giving feedback. Yep. A lot of the time we would speak to clients that are just starting out, and this is the common line we get, back in November, December 2023, I tried ChatGPT, just didn't really give me the results. And we said, okay, so tell me about that. How did you try it? And it's to your point, they put in one prompt and the results came back really fast. Now, that's not the result. Yep. Like, okay, well, it's not called prompt GPT, it's called chat. So did you then give it feedback? Did you say, no, that's not quite right? Did you refine it? No. Okay, so let's think about that. And even that little step around, think about it as a conversation, an ongoing interaction, giving feedback, giving better instructions, completely changes the way that these models work. But I think we see a huge, huge percentage of the population and clients that we start working with, they would often say, well, I tried it, didn't work for me. But when you drill into it, how are you trying it? And one of our hypotheses is that we've all been trained by Google to answer questions in a certain way. You know that built-in letterbox at Google? You ask a question and get an answer. We've been conditioned to think that way. We've got to unlearn that and think about a different way of interacting with these tools.
Yeah, so in our office, I used to be called, my superpower was I could Google anything and find something where people couldn't. But that's a similar skill that you'll need to have with ChatGPT, is know how to communicate with it. It's asking the right questions, refining, but then understanding, probably through playing with it a lot as well, is what nuance you have to provide to get it to skew to the direction you want. Because just asking in a certain way or telling it not to do something now injects that in its thinking, and it's like talking to a kid. Don't do that, and it does it. So there's a lot of little things you have to learn there. But
yes.
I think I've got a similar experience to that, using it one time and didn't get the results. We had an OpenAI account with GPT-2, and we tested it and all right, it's cool for a blog post. And then that was all I ever did with it. And that was a year before ChatGPT 3 came out. So we didn't even understand what it was at that point, but I wish I knew how to look at it properly that long ago, because then we'd be miles ahead with like the product that we're building and doing other things. So it really does come down to not just having heard of something, understanding, like I believe you need to play with something and understand how it works a little bit, so then you can connect the dots on how to actually utilize it better.
Yes. And I love that, playing and testing, experimenting. And because anyone with a smart, like the cool thing about these tools is that anyone with a smartphone and a data plan has access to them.
Yep.
And that's first time. Like there's no pipes to lay, there's no tracks to put down. You've got that now. So what we often recommend people to do is experiment with it in your personal life, because that's a safe space. And then you can all of a sudden start going, oh, what if I could do this at work? So things like we tell some of our clients, when you go home tonight, or when you're at home, when you finished your day from working at home, take a picture of the inside of your fridge with ChatGPT or Claude and ask it for dinner that night, or ask it for your shopping list. Like, what do you mean? We said, try it. And that kind of stuff, and they do it and they come back and they say, oh, this was amazing. Like, I made this really great pasta. And then I thought about it and I said, and then I tried this and then I tried that. I took it with me when I went to Woolies and I was taking pictures of products and saying, could this product fit in with my diet? And then the brain we're starting to unwind the Google search query approach. And I love your idea. They're testing it and then thinking about how might that apply in a different context, in my work context.
Yeah. It's all about, exploring and getting that background with it. So I didn't really dive into, it was November 2022, ChatGPT was released. I didn't really dive into it until probably end of January. My business partner was using it earlier. And then by the time we hit probably March, I had a way to revolutionize the way we're doing everything in our business, just from a small amount of playing with it. But that's because I was playing with it. Before that, it was, this helps me draft an email. This helps me write content. But it's not until you understand what the capabilities are, or it doesn't just generate content, it can help you formulate things, or understanding how it works.
Yeah.
For lack of a better way of explaining it.
Yeah, I really like that. And we're even pushing people to say, and I've got a hunch that prompt engineering will be the most short-lived career in history, because pretty soon you shouldn't need to prompt. These are the dumbest models we're ever going to use. And I think the fact that they're the dumbest models we're ever going to use, people are like, oh, what does that mean? Well, one way is that the fact we have to think about prompting is not a thing that I think most people should need to do within the next 4 or 5 months. So even now we're starting to see is, don't stress about getting that top 10 prompts to use. And I'm saying, ignore that, because most of our clients are saying, this is a funny story, is that one of my clients said to me, I've got this browser window open in Google. I've had it open for the last 3 months, and it's these top 20 prompts for my industry. I haven't ever read it, but I don't want to close it because I'll need it. But they've never got round to reading it, because this is not working for people.
Yeah, it's in their back pocket, just in case.
And he showed me, he's got the browser window open. And then I said to him, I said, well, don't worry about that. Ask the model for the prompts for itself. So have something you're trying to do and then say to Claude or ChatGPT, I'm trying to do this thing. My job is this, and I want your help with it. Can you write me the prompts I should use with yourself? I'm saying yourself as
Yep.
making the model
I
human.
talk to it like a person too, don't worry.
Yes.
I say please and thank you.
Yeah, me too, because well, one day when the robots take over, they'll remember this person said please and thank you to me, so I'm not going to eradicate them. But that's a really good hack, is what prompt, can you write me the prompts to use? And then they list out the prompts. And then we actually tried this the other week. We were being a bit cheeky. We said, I think it was, we were also testing Meta's model, Llama, a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then Llama had spat out all the prompts they want to use, and we just said go. And it started just working through the prompts.
Yep.
The other really cool thing we found, just a bit of a side point, and this is only the last couple of days, was we still write a few prompts, but we would more talk about the task, and we talk now. We use voice probably 70% of the time, and we just talk to the models, and then it's starting to input what we're trying to do. We say, oh, we're trying to do this task. We want your help. This is what success is. But before we say for it to actually start doing the task, what we're doing now is we're saying, before you start on this task, do you have any questions for us?
Yep.
And the questions we get back are awesome. Awesome in the sense that it really breaks out. And Claude did this, I think 2 days ago with us. We were creating this really big document for an education provider. And we're trying to redesign a whole, this training units. And we say, oh, we want you to do this. We want you to follow this framework, this new approach for digital literacy, et cetera, I won't bore you with the details. But then before we pressed go, we said, do you have any questions for us? And Claude came back and said, yes, I've actually got 4 questions. Do you want me to consolidate all my answers in one document? When I consolidate it, would you like a contents page? I think that maybe I should separate the outputs by a page break. Would you like me to do that? And it was brilliant, because it was all the things that we probably would actually have given the human, but we hadn't thought about to give to the model. And we said, yes for points 1 to 3, no for point 4. Great, and now I'll start. And the quality of the outputs was another level up. So that was also a really useful hack we find, is just before you get to do a task, ask it if there are any clarifying questions. I like saying clarifying, but ask if it has any questions. And it makes a big difference.
Yeah, I follow that approach whenever we ask it for content. So if you're writing an article or a blog post, ask me more questions or a strategy, so I can then provide more context to you, to the bot, to then actually understand what it's doing. Another useful tip like that I found is if you ask it to explain its reasoning as it's doing the answer, that then helps, because it's autocomplete effectively. If it's got the prefacing text before the actual answer, it's putting it into a different context of where the actual information is coming from. Because now it's looking for similarities to that text that's explaining what it should be doing, rather than just having a larger output. That's another one that's useful.
That's I love that. I want to use that. Great idea.
It adds more depth.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. It makes me think as well. What we also, because this is what we find really interesting, is I think people are familiar, or some people may be familiar with, where you give it a persona, so it answers in a certain way, is the simplicity of stitching together a couple of those personas into a really simple workflow. Pretty technical. In a chat, having the chat GPT, within a chat or with Claude, we ask it to switch personas from you're the doer, the creator of content, and then we flip it to now you're the reviewer. A really, really great one that we often use for a reviewer is that the persona we give it is that you're a Wharton or an MIT professor of a highly accomplished MBA students, and everything you can see above in the chat is your students have submitted it to you. Please critique, review, update their outputs. We found that one really useful, because the way it does the critiquing versus sometimes we say, oh, please review your outputs. But what we've learned is that there's a certain style of critiquing MBA students' work, which is actually
Yep.
really
Okay.
constructive and really specific,
Yeah.
and
So you
it
try
drills
and
into sources heaps.
focus
So
it into that.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
a really good one that we find.
So we just dived into some tips now. Another one that I find is
Yeah.
the personas. I generally say you are a X, Y, Z, whatever I can think of that's important. And the reason that one works is it's like indexing the content that it now needs to reference out of everything in its data sets going, all right, I need to go into this little section of my back pocket where I've got all this information about software development or marketing, not everything that it's been trained upon across the entire internet. I can ignore medical papers because that's not part of this context now. So it's just
Yes.
framing where to start searching knowledge, which is part of the keyword skill you have with Google. It's certain keywords at the start of the query help frame the responses that you need.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's you are is fantastic, and there's something else we find there as well is because some of our clients they go, oh yeah, okay, you're an expert management consultant. I say, well, stop. So management consultants are generalists; they have general knowledge.
Yep.
Who is the best possible person on the planet at doing the tasks that you're thinking about? And they go, oh, what do you mean? So we're working with an investment bank, and we said, well, who is the best person on the planet at spotting unicorns or great new ideas and making really sound investment decisions? Someone put their hand up and said, oh, Warren Buffett. Great. Okay, so what are the things Warren Buffett is really good at? And then they started to talk through. And I said, well, are any of those things that you say Warren Buffett is great at, do you have to do any of that in your role? And they're like, oh, yeah, I have to do that and that. So then we said to them, well, the next time you need to do that task, give the AI model the persona of Warren Buffett, because what you've said is that Warren Buffett is the best person in the world at that task. And that's where they start to go, oh, okay, so they're the best person on the planet at that specific task,
Yep.
not just, marketing professional, but who has transformed the way marketing was done was in that specific segment. Or another random example that you were using with the fitness program and a whole set of coaches, and they were coaching high performance endurance athletes. So we're helping them, how might they augment, and it got into the digital twin, and they were critiquing athletes' posture and with video analysis. But as a step back from that, as we said, well, who are coaches that have inspired you to become a coach? And they listed them all off. They said, well, there's a great place to start. What is great about them? How do you incorporate that into your prompt? And I think you described it really well, is it causes the model to then index and
Yep.
search in and answer in a certain way. And it's amazing the way it changes the responses.
Yeah, it's just little tips from using it and then seeing what other people have done to experiment with. And for those listening, that's useful because it's been trained on hundreds of gigabytes of data going from any public website, all medical papers and white papers and research papers that are available, any public, it's all Reddit, Twitter. Can't even think of what else. Probably, who knows how much AI content it's been trained on itself as well.
There's as a fun tip or a fun fact we found is OpenAI did a big lot of their training on all of the emails and everything around Enron, because that was all publicly available information. So part of me goes, interesting, because how does that shape? Because there's a whole lot of stuff that happened in Enron that we definitely don't want repeated. But it just shows you the sort of information that it does have access to.
Different corners of Reddit will influence that the same as well. But then, telling it to focus on X is now it's going to go from hundreds of gigabytes to maybe 300 megabytes of actual relevant content that it's mostly drawing from that are similar to the terms you're looking at.
Yeah.
Because that's all it's doing. It's finding similarity. And then depending on if you're using ChatGPT, you don't have as much control. But when you use the AI, you can tell it how random to be through there's a temperature field, which is repeat the same content. If I ask you the question 5 times, is 0 temperature, or then go all the way up to 1, and you can now give me different answers every single time and be as creative as possible. So you've got a bit more flexibility when you do it that way as well, to then change and try to get different outputs.
And that's a really important call out, because questions we sometimes get, And these are for some people that are maybe a bit experienced with machine learning, because AI has been around for a long time. And there's some brilliant people that have involved in AI for a lot, for longer than I've been in my current career, is helping people understand that these models aren't searching from a database. They aren't going, oh, the answer is there in that database. So there's not this giant Excel spreadsheet where, based on the question you ask, great, pull that off here. It is generating an answer every single time based on probability. And that's a really important thing to understand, because that's why you can influence the answer based on what you ask, versus we're familiar with, we have a huge database and the back end, and it goes, okay, based on this query, okay, yep, I've searched, I found it in cell XZ 3050, answer, there's your answer.
Yep.
It's not how they work. And I think that's a really important distinction for people to make, and why both the possibilities are so different with these models.
Yeah, so when we go out to businesses and we do a presentation called ChatGPT Sucks, and it's all about how to leverage it in workflows, not just use ChatGPT. The example I use there is, if you ask it what's the most popular food in the world, if the three answers are pizza, tacos, and pasta, over its entire database, and pizza is the answer 70% of the time, if your lower temperature is 0, it'll repeat pizza repeatedly, and you'll very rarely get the other ones. But then it'll generate an answer, and if you go all the way up to 1, it'll skip the other options and come up with something completely different, because now it's got the chance to, it's got more freedom, but it is just generating the next word that seems appropriate in the sentence that it's giving you. And the difference with your phone is, your phone looks at 1 or 2 words behind to check the next word that it's doing when it's doing autocomplete. This is checking not just the previous sentence, but the previous 3,000 words, 4,000, 5,000 words as well.
Yep. Yeah. I love the name of that session, ChatGPT.
Yeah, we've got like a dead robot on the cover of the PowerPoint.
And it's interesting you say that as well, because I was only reading something last night, and it really resonated about how I think a really good first step for a lot of organizations is training, so getting people to understand, and then maybe giving a license to a tool. But that isn't integrating, that isn't augmenting your business with AI. So to your point, is spot on, is what are the way you might change your workflows? How does that fundamentally different? So I think having your team understanding with the knowledge and being trained, great, and they're starting to use, say, ChatGPT for tasks, but you're not augmenting your business. That's just the first sort of baby steps, but really thinking fundamentally, how do we change how we work, what we do?
Yep.
ChatGPT may sort of play a role, but that isn't the answer. And a couple of months ago, we would often, especially when we spoke to, and this was sort of the nail in the coffin of really large organizations, that we've decided that they're just not for us. They can get probably better service from different companies. There was a CIO of a very large property development company we were speaking to. Brilliant organization. They do great stuff. And when we asked, how do I say this in a way? So we were talking about, how do you see the opportunity? How do you believe you want to become an AI first organization? Are you wanting to augment your staff? All of those great questions, because we're curious to understand their vision.
Yep.
The response was, it's okay, we've solved AI because we've given everyone access to Copilot. And you're like, right, okay. But it was, guys, they were saying to us, he was almost like patting us on the head. It's okay, you got to do you, but we've solved the AI thing. We've got everyone's got Copilot. We're now doing AI.
Yep.
So there's that. We've switched on Copilot.
And that's
personally, I'm not a big fan.
That's not understanding the capabilities and just seeing, all right, something's so commoditized that you can just flick a switch and now it's enabled to everyone. But what policies are in place? How have you educated everyone to use it? How are you informing data? What are your gate controls? What should go in? What shouldn't? There's a lot of things there. And I'm sure over the past year of being out on your own with Friyay and your partners and talking to businesses, you're probably seeing the way I may be seeing it. There's 3 different ways people are looking at it. Is it's too complicated, I don't need it, or I'm not interested, or I don't know how to get into it. There's how quick can we add a chatbot into something? And now we're AI. And then there's the third model is, all right, you've actually got a proper use case here. You can start a prototype with ChatGPT or OpenAI or any of those models. But then how do we get into like a custom trained model collecting your data? Are you seeing those same parallels as well?
Yeah, I think that's a really good example, especially that middle one in particular. Like, cool, chatbot on my website.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other, I'd probably add to that first, and this is maybe because we speak to a lot of small businesses. The biggest chat to add to your first point is I just don't have the time. I kind of I can see that it could help me. I don't have the time to learn about it and then do it properly. And that's, I think, where our thesis, our underlying thesis for these models is tools like ChatGPT or other generative tools are easier than you think, but more powerful than you can imagine.
Yeah.
And I think that starts to solve for that first problem. But yeah, that second problem, absolutely.
That's everyone is building an app has a chatbot on their roadmap, in their backlog, or in somewhere in production that they're hiding because they realize it's not doing what it's supposed to. Yeah, the training models is at another level. Now you're giving it more precise data about your use case, not just your business. It has to be a very, very focused domain of knowledge that you're giving into it. So you've probably done a little bit more on the fine tuning than we might have. So I'll let you take that.
Yeah, good. It's a good point, and it's so retrieval augmented generation is obviously the big focus, and people might see it up as RAG, but using plain human language, you're giving it knowledge, and then you have a prompt structuring or prompt architecture that sits on top of that knowledge so that it can answer questions in a certain way. And what I think, so there's that, like a lot of clients are they end up going down that retrieval augmented generation path, which is, it sort of then goes back into option 2, which is really a smart generative assistant.
Building up a knowledge base, uploading documents, or providing other content that's relevant for that specific workflow.
But what we're finding as well, though, is that because of how good these models are starting to get and how you can stitch a couple of tasks together, which becomes an agent, which is really just a number of different AI models doing different tasks, is the ability to work with unstructured data is phenomenal already. And we really encourage some of our clients. So a great example, the ones that we're working with that are really pushing the boundaries, some of these small businesses, it's always held them back. Well, I haven't had the time and money to get a CRM set up. They're now thinking, I don't need a CRM. If I can augment my team well with generative AI tools, CRMs are obsolete. Our hypothesis is probably why Salesforce is investing a huge amount of money in Einstein. They've seen the writing on the wall. CRM systems, based on what we currently think, obsolete pretty soon because you can now, if you think about your interactions with clients, is if you have an assistant that is in that interaction with you, that's properly trained to listen and take information, then works with another assistant to follow up with, oh, great, I've just been in this meeting, write the proposal for me, send the email back, record all that information for me. Then you have a third assistant that sits on top of all of those transcripts and all of your customer data. You don't need a CRM system. You can talk to, and we're currently training a tool to do this, you can talk to one assistant that sits on top of all of it. It could be unstructured, it could be Teams files that aren't even organized very well. It's got a whole lot of your product list, and then it's got all of your transcripts of all your conversations with clients. You can ask that assistant to say, which client should I talk to next? Or it even surfaces, those last 3 clients you spoke to, next time you speak to them, talk about these 3 products because they are the most likely ones they're going to take up next. You're not having to sit there and look up and assist. And we're working with a couple of sales teams, the same thing. There's nothing salespeople hate more than going into a CRM system.
The way you understand the CRM will change. There's still going to be potentially some structured data store, a lot of unstructured data, but you're having those assistants, 20 of them potentially, that are giving you information and formatting things and then talking to each other rather than you going to interrogate and going, all right, who wrecked the dashboard now that I'm trying to go back to it and I've lost a widget or something and I can't get what I need.
I'm like, why is that there? And I'm like, and then my boss is telling me I have to log all this stuff and create these file notes. why? It's like, well, what's the ideal experience you want to have? Like, oh, I want to spend more time talking to my clients, having great conversations, and then helping them with the right stuff.
Yep.
Everything else in the middle is faff, like going and typing and doing that. It's a way that's trying to help them do more, but it isn't quite solving for that.
Yeah.
So how do you augment that experience so
It's
you get to have really great conversations with more people?
yeah, it's probably the way everyone was expecting Siri and like Google Assistant and Alexa to actually work. But
Yep.
it's getting to that point now where it's just silently there, all these different AI note takers. But then it's how do you build a workflow, then take those notes and do those things and build up these agent networks and give you a way to interact with it. And that's where the value comes from. And that's, as we mentioned before, those workflows. It's all about the workflows.
Yep. Yep. And that's how we think about it as well, being human-centered designers. Is we say to our clients is tell us what those experiences are. Just tell us the tasks that your team are doing. What do they hate doing? Bring to life their experience. What would you wish they should be able to do? What's going to bring joy back to them? What are they great at? Understanding all of those, having that view of like an end-to-end experience, and then starting to think about how might we augment this experience with AI. There's so much more power in that. And like you're right, the workflow is not, here's a ChatGPT license. Here's Copilot.
And the website of prompts that are useful.
Yeah, exactly. We've ticked that box, or we switch on. They're just not getting the results. And I think I've got a strong belief that over the next sort of 5 to 6 months, we'll start to see a bit more of not quite getting. So you'll see there's going to be a couple of camps of companies. There'll be the companies that gave all the tools with no training, or spent a ton of money creating their own chatbot or their own like GPT, insert their company name in front of GPT, like PwC GPT or whatever you want to call it. Like there's ton, or EY GPT. You see all those out there. You see a ton of that happening. Very little return on investment. You'll see the ones that are not wanting to embrace it are very quickly going, oh no, all of a sudden we're being squashed. And then you'll see the others that are thinking in the workflow sense. The ones that think in that sense, the advantage, the head start they're getting will be nothing like they ever thought they could experience. All of a sudden they've optimized themselves for it, and then you'll get new, more powerful, even better models that they're starting to plug into those workflows that they've understood, and they understood how the models work. And the advantage that they have will be beyond compare. And they'll start to unlock value that they hadn't really thought was possible.
Yeah, and on 2 points on that is where we are now is the worst it's ever going to be. Like yesterday was the worst that it ever was. Today would be the worst it ever was. That's just it's always going to get better, and we really can't imagine. And then touching on that point where those businesses that are using it, a lot of people had that fear like, all right, ChatGPT is going to take our job. ChatGPT is not going to take someone's job. It's a person using it will take someone who's not using its job. It's utilizing the tools to be able to do better. And you have to remember it's a tool. It's not a replacement.
That's such good language to use. It's not a replacement, it's a tool. And I agree with your comment. Nothing frustrates me more when I see posts about someone going to a conference, and you'll see, and what should be someone who's pretty educated, some big tech company saying, AI is going to take your job. I can't stand when people say that, because to be honest, AI is pretty crap at jobs. It's phenomenal at tasks. And it's phenomenal at augmenting tasks and augmenting the human, to your point, the person using it. So thinking of it that way is much more effective. And like you drill in and you ask questions of these people saying, oh, AI is going to take your job. You say, oh, tell me how. And then it's going to revolutionize industry. You're like, oh, cool. How? Tell me. Like, and I'm not doing it. And people are like, oh, you're being an absolute annoying person. I'm like, but I genuinely want to know how. Like, for me, being a designer, I want to know how and why. And also those statements don't help. It's going to take your job, because just perpetuating the fear, and then people aren't going to embrace it. Where I would love if we're more positive and saying, here's how you think about how it's going to make your work better. Here's how it might liberate your time. Here's how it might bring back joy. It takes a bit of work, but here's the opportunity and the possibility, and here's help to get you there. Not, if you don't do this, it's all over and job to go on. It just, that's how does that help? Like
it doesn't. But it's saying that I'm guilty of using that rhetoric myself. So I explain to people when I'm explaining why I built the software that we're building is I'm trying to replace myself. So I'm trying to put myself out of a job by using a tool that can do what I do. But then I go through to and explain that my job now changes from just typing stuff in on the keyboard to having critical thinking, putting in expertise, correcting and reviewing and putting in the missing things that it doesn't understand. But yeah, job A is no longer around because that's the data entry is not the job, it's the thinking. So A.2 is now the new job where you have an assistant that can do the first part. But it just helps sell the point sometimes.
Yeah, no, that's a great point because you've described those tasks which it doesn't make sense for you as a human to be doing. And that loops back. A good, sometimes I say to people is that if you want to know where to get started, next Sunday night or Sunday afternoon, as you're thinking about your next week of work, if there's anything in your week that makes you go, ugh, or feel heavy or not want to turn up to work, those are the first things you should think about experimenting with AI.
Yep.
Any of that kind of stuff where you're like, oh, you know, you've got to do it, but the big sigh, I'm like, oh, I've got to face that next week. Great. Those should be your first use cases. Those are the first things you should try, you should think about. So your point around data entry, I guarantee a lot of people are like, oh, you know, I've got this monster spreadsheet, I've got to take X from Y, put this data, and like, that makes me feel heavy and not joyful.
Yeah.
If that's you can,
put half an hour aside, sit down with a glass of whiskey or a wine or something and just play with it for half an hour, and I'm sure you'll spend an hour or two, maybe more, once you actually just give it a go.
Yep.
It's
I
just
like that.
Trying it.
Yep. Experiment. Yeah. Just get in there and start experimenting with it.
Yeah. If anyone wants to reach out and find out more about what you do at Friyay, Gareth, and reach out to yourself in general, how can they do that?
Two things. Friyay.ai, our website. We keep it pretty simple. Have a little bit of what we do. We also publish a ton of stuff there, and also on our YouTube channel. We try and give as much away as we can for free in terms of learning. Yep. And then also follow myself, Charmaine Chan or Ben Dunn on LinkedIn, because also that's a channel we use a lot. We're posting every day with simple video tips and tricks, because to your point, if people can start experimenting, if there's one tip that they go, great, I can start doing that, that's a win for us. So those two places are the best to find out about us.
Awesome. And we'll add those links to the show notes. Once again, thanks for joining us on the podcast. It's been a great chat, and it's been really good. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Anthony. Have a great day.
You too.